Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting for Wednesday, the 30th of June 2021. Could I please ask Councillor Tukapua to start us off? Thank you.
Me noi tātou, e tō mātou matu i te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tai mai tauranga tiratanga, kia me te atau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi, ho mai kia mātou aia nei he taronga mātou mo tēnei rā, mura o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muri nei i o te hunga e harana kia mātou, aua hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangi e mātou te kino, nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kōrea ake, amen.
Thank you. Okay, so apologies.
We have an apology from Councillor Ketu.
I'll move that apology. Could I have a second? Councillor Allen, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Public participation?
None requested.
Late items? None. Declarations of interest? Councillor James.
Just consistent with previous declarations at earlier meetings, confirm my pecuniary interest involving my spouse with the council's contract with its economic development provider, Horowhenua New Zealand Trust. And I just wanted to note that when I discuss and vote today on matters relating to the full council budget and the setting of rates, I'm doing so on the basis that the specific economic development services budget line was isolated and approved through deliberations at the end of May. And I abstained from that, so I wasn't involved in any decision around the approval of that amount for those services.
Yeah, thank you. Just 9.1, the adoption of the development contributions. Obviously, I'll be declaring a conflict there. Thank you.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you. As in the past, similar 9.1, I'll be sitting up the table for that.
Thank you all. So, moving to the confirmation of minutes, the open and in-committee council meeting minutes held on the 9th of June 2020, that these minutes be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'll move. Could I have a second, please? Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Any announcements? None. Okay. So we now move to page number 7, which is the proceedings of the Community Funding and Recognition Committee for the 9th of June 2021. Move that this 2.1, 2.2, that we receive the minutes. Councillor Isaacs, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Tukapua. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? Carried. So now to 2.4. Are there any questions or clarifications around that required? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I just want to confirm for the ratepayer groups, it's definitely the Horowhenua Community Development Grant that best fits their applications for their paperwork, sort of the ability to actually run as a group. Is that correct?
Do you wish to respond to that?
Are you talking about like Hydre and those ones?
Okay, Progressive, Manukau, those sorts of groups.
Yeah, versus what used to be called their consultation grant.
So we have 2.4 in front of us, that as recommended by the Community Funding and Recognition Committee, the Horowhenua District Council adopts the following grant types, funding allocation and criteria for the 2021-2022 financial year. Horowhenua Community Development Grant of $60,000, a Horowhenua Vibrant Communities Grant of $20,000, a Horowhenua Community and Social Services Grant of $30,000, a Horowhenua Special Projects Grant of $20,000, and the Horowhenua Rural Halls grant of $30,000, giving a total allocation for the year of $160,000. Councillor Allen's prepared to move that. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Tukapua. Any discussion? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving to the Chief Executive's report, and we were going to have a whiteboard here so that we could right. Okay, so can I move? This is to obviously talk about voting on the remits at the LGNZ conference. Move that the report be received. Moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Okay, so the process that we're going to follow here is that we will first ask if there is any information or queries or clarification that elected members need before giving their direction on these remits first. So does anyone, and then we will move to a support or not support or neutral on each issue, on each remit, and so that will give me guidance as to how the council should vote at the annual general meeting of LGNZ.
Can I,
Councillor Kay-Simmons.
just around remit 1 for the tree protection, and obviously there was quite a bit of reading, thanks to Auckland City Council on that. How does this particular remit affect us here in the Horowhenua, if at all? If it's just a straightforward, because I know we have notable tree and all that stuff here anyway, but is there any direct effect to us, I guess I'm asking?
Okay, so look, my apologies. The person that I would ask, David McCorkindale, is not here just at the moment. We have got people that are still doing other things. So look, there are some rules in the existing district plan, and we've also identified notable trees as I understand it, but the impact that this might have on our council, I haven't heard anything to say that it would have a significant impact, but I can see if I can find David McCorkindale just to see if we can actually get some clarification. Maybe if we leave that one just for the moment, and then we can move on to the other ones. Okay, I'll just see if I can find out.
Can I just clarify that I also had a question around that, and particularly a bit more specific than Councillor Kay-Simmons, which was around would there be any impact on if we supported this and it was adopted and then the legislation changed, would that cause difficulties for us in relation to the plain trees down Oxford Street? Is my specific question.
Okay, so as the Chief Executive has indicated, we will seek some guidance from David McCorkindale shortly and hopefully resolve that. So we'll now move to Remit 2, which is the rating value of forestry land. And, sorry, I just need to find the page. Sorry, 82, thank you. It was a long report, wasn't it? So that LGNZ requests the Valuer General to amend the relevant legislation to allow for local government to address the growing disparities between the rating valuation of forestry land and other land users. So any moving to my left, Councillor Brannigan. Support, Councillor Jennings.
Support.
Councillor Tukapua. Councillor Allen,
Support.
Councillor Mitchell,
Support.
Councillor Isaacs,
Support.
Councillor Case Simmons,
Support.
Councillor Bishop,
Support.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Support.
Thank you. Moving to, support, sorry, am I allowed to remit number 3, the funding of civics education. That local government New Zealand advocate to central government for provision of funding to enable councils to engage in civics education for high school children. Proposed by the Hamilton City Council with a number of supporters. So we'll move to the right hand side this time. Deputy Mayor Mason.
Support.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Allen.
As a point of order, I wonder if there should be the opportunity for discussion first, because it may well be that people would like to hear some views before they vote.
Apologies, because I had actually asked that question if there were any issues of clarification.
Issue, I guess, as we go through.
I was trying to do that before we went to each issue, rather
It might
than
be
go back and
tidier
forth.
if we do it on each issue.
We'll follow Councillor
Well,
Allen's,
just this issue.
okay. So do you have a question?
Look, not a question, but I just wish to make an observation on this remit. Yeah, which is to support it. It does not affect in any way council money. It's not about council funding. It's about central government funding, and I really think there's an opportunity here for engagement with the local community through the young people, tamariki, to actually engage in what local government is about through a civics program in schools. And it also ties in neatly with the introduction soon to come of the New Zealand history syllabus. So to me, it's a perfect timing thing at no cost to council.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Mason.
Look, in line with what Councillor Allen has said, I think there are some gaps in knowledge and understanding of what it is a council does, and with the reforms that we're facing and the conversations about the future of local government that are coming up, I think this is perfect timing, and I absolutely support this remit.
Councillor Bishop.
I'm against it, please.
Simmons.
Support.
Councillor Isaacs.
Against.
I'm against.
Councillor Allen.
Support.
Councillor Tukapua.
Support.
Councillor Jennings.
I'm against. I'm sorry I didn't get to explain why, but that's fine.
Councillor Brannigan. Support. And I will support. Remit number 4 is the promoting local government electoral participation. The remit states that the power of the Chief Executive has under the Local Government Act 42.2DA for facilitating and fostering representative and substantial elector participation in election and polls held under the Local Electoral Act 2001 be removed and placed with the Electoral Commission. Been proposed by Palmerston North City Council, supported by Zone 3. Questions? So, Councillor Brannigan. Support. Councillor Jennings.
What?
Councillor Tukapua.
Support.
Councillor Allen.
Support.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Isaacs.
Support.
Councillor Case Simmons.
Support.
Councillor Bishop.
For.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Support.
And support also. Remit number 5 relates to carbon emission inventory standards and reduction targets. That LGNZ works with central government in A, developing consistent emission and inventory standards for use by local and regional authorities, and B, setting science-based emissions reduction targets to support delivery on our national determined contribution under the Paris Agreement and our nationwide emissions budgets being established by government via advice from the Climate Change Commission. Deputy Mayor Mason. Councillor Bishop.
Against.
Councillor Kay Simmons,
Support.
Councillor Isaacs,
Against.
Councillor Mitchell,
For.
Councillor Allen,
Support.
Councillor Tukapua,
Neutral.
abstaining, or neutral, sorry, yep.
I'm also neutral.
Councillor Jennings, Councillor against. And I will vote against as well. Alright, so we're on a stalemate that one. That will have to. Okay. Remit number 6, the Winds Accommodation Supplement remit that LGNZ works with government to 1. Conduct an urgent review of the Work and Income New Zealand.
We just go back to this just so clarify what will now happen with your budget right here in LGNZ as
To abstaining.
you'll start.
Well, no, we've got 2 abstaining. I mean,
Neutral, but there's
four, yeah.
four against. So we actually have the council position at the moment. So it's, I understand.
Councillor Allen.
In light of that, Mr. Mayor, I propose that we enable you or your substitutes to listen to the debate and to make a decision on the day.
I mean, that's Councillor Jennings. Did you?
Yeah, I was just going to support exactly what Councillor Allen said, just beat me to it.
Generally, you find that these are pretty clear cut. There's generally not that sort of degree of sort of closeness. You're right. The conversation will determine. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So, all right, going back to remit number 6, that LGNZ works with the government to 1. Conduct an urgent review of the Work and Income New Zealand Accommodation Supplement ASI system zones in partnership with territorial authorities, and 2. Schedule a 2-yearly review of the WINS A5 system, AS system, zones in partnership with territorial authorities ongoing. Proposed by the Queenstown Lakes District Council. Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, look, I just did want to speak to this one. I am going to vote to support this. I think these payments are critically important to people in areas where the cost of living is high but average wages are below the national average, and that's clearly us. I think I've gone away and done a bit of research on this particular issue, and it appears that Levin is considered Zone 3 and Horowhenua is Zone 4 in terms of the supplement index, and that is just completely out of step with where we find our not only our rental market but just the general property market. And I wanted just to offer a comparison here in that the median rental price for a 3-bedroom house in Levin was $420 at the end of March, according to REN's data. And that compares to Palmerston North, which was also $420, and Auckland, which was at $550. So you can see that we're actually not that far away from some of the bigger centres, with who are the poster children for the pressure around housing. And so for that reason, I think it's absolutely critical, given our national the average income in Horowhenua is again $10,000 less than the national average. I think this is absolutely critical that we support this.
Thank you. So if we start with your vote then. Councillor Tukapua.
Support.
Councillor Allen.
Support.
Councillor Mitchell.
Support.
Councillor Isaacs.
Support.
Councillor Kay Simmons.
Support.
Councillor Bishop.
Support.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Support.
I will support. Councillor Brannigan.
Support.
Thank you. Agreement number 7. That LGNZ works with government to obtain legal protection / indemnity from the Crown in favour of all councils and or to implement a warranty scheme for any civil liability claim brought against a council with regards to building consent functions carried out by consentium, a division of Kaingaroa, as any such cost should not be borne by ratepayers. Everyone comfortable with that? Councillor Mitchell, we'll start with you.
Support.
Councillor Isaacs? Support. Councillor Kay Sillins?
Support.
Councillor Vision? Support. Deputy Mayor Mason?
Support.
I will support. Councillor Brannigan? Support. Councillor Jennings? Support. Councillor Tukapua?
Support.
Councillor Allen? Support. Thank you. So, moving back to remit number 1, and Mr McCorkindale has arrived. So, Councillor Kay Simmons, would you like to repeat your question for Mr McCorkindale?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So my question previously was around the remit and notable trees, and just how in any way does it affect us as a district? Because we really need to be focusing on planting more as well as, and I do know that we have the 3 Ds for us, the dead, disease, dying. We don't really have a budget for replacing trees, and I'm just thinking of, as Sam mentioned, the plane trees in Oxford Street and some of the other areas where we have sensitive, notable trees in place. So if you could answer that, that'd be great.
So this remit, which is about essentially removing some of the provisions that are currently in the RMA, would actually give us greater scope than we currently have. So we're a council that individually protects individual trees. So we weren't caught out by the change in legislation, which was more common in places like Auckland, where they would protect groups of trees, give all the trees within that group the same status. Our notable trees are based on individual trees, so trees being assessed against certain criteria, meeting a certain standard, and then having that level of protection. So this change here is seeking to go back to that approach of being able to protect groups of trees rather than individual trees, so it would actually give us greater scope than what we currently have. Whether that changes the approach that this council takes is another decision, but it would give us greater scope to protect trees.
Any further clarification required? Councillor Mitchell.
So would that make it more difficult for landowners or homeowners to actually take down trees that were shading their property or getting too big or annoying them because council wanted to have more greenery around the area?
The provisions are around notable trees, or essentially protecting trees. So the trees would have to be identified and go through a process of being identified. So that's usually for us, it's the district plan process. At the moment, as I say, we have a process of identifying individual trees. If we were to start identifying and protecting groups of trees, they'd need to be identified, assessed, and go through that process. Yes, if they were protected, then that is the very reason to make it more difficult to take them down, but it wouldn't be an automatic. The rule or this remit doesn't automatically suddenly protect trees that haven't been through a formal process.
Thank you, David. Oh, Councillor Bray.
Sorry, Dave, just one more question, yeah. So in terms of we've got rules in our district plan, from what I've seen, and I've had as much to read as I've been able to, but I just wonder whether do we need extra rules in our district? Is it a problem for us? What are the advantages? And again, if we go down this track and support this, what does that mean? Is that more resource coming out of the back room to go through that process? Because it sounds a bit like the heritage buildings, which can obviously take a fair bit of time. What's the benefit? Because I'm struggling to see it, to be fair, because obviously we're doing okay around it. I don't see an issue, but I'm a barrel.
So in terms of the remit, it would still require a further decision of this council to decide to, I guess, use what would be the new legislation. Probably a small benefit to council could be in terms of efficiency. So at the moment, to protect individual trees is more intensive, time intensive, and comes with a cost, than potentially maybe being able to do that single process of protecting a group of trees altogether. this remit, if it went through, would obviously give council the ability to have the opportunity to do that, whereas under the current legislation, it's basically limited to essentially individual trees, which is, as I say, consistent with the approach we currently take. If it was to go through, it does provide the opportunity for this council to have greater flexibility in terms of how it might decide to protect trees going forward. Wouldn't automatically place an extra burden on the organisation. That would be a decision that this council would make in terms of its approach to notable trees and reviewing its current process.
Councillor Mitchell.
So, as well as identifying groups of trees, could it identify types of trees, like, for example, native trees? I'm just thinking a couple of years ago, some people down Otaki Way got into big trouble for cutting down some scrubby natives in their section and were going to be fined horrendous amounts for doing that because they were protected. I'm just wondering about property owners' rights, I guess, here. So could that possibly be something that would happen? Is it the council might decide that native trees cannot be cut down, that they're protected?
So currently council has a particular process it goes through. It's called the STEM evaluation method. Trees have to reach a certain number of points to be then deemed to be a notable tree and receive that protection that comes with a notable tree. Probably similar to my first answer to you earlier, it's a decision of council as to what route it wants to take with this. If council does decide actually there is benefit in protecting native trees or native trees in a particular area, then this remit does potentially, I guess, give scope to that, to do that in a group rather than the individual tree level. But it does come down to, I guess, the direction and appetite of this council in terms of what level of protection and pathway it wants to take, or trees it wants to include within notable trees or protection of trees.
I think this time, David, thank you. Okay, starting with Councillor Allen this time. Councillor Allen, for or against?
Support.
Support. Councillor Tupua.
Neutral.
Councillor Jennings.
Against.
Councillor Brannigan.
I just have supported.
I will support it. Deputy Mayor Mason.
I will support it.
Councillor Bishop.
Against.
Councillor Kay Simmons.
Support.
Councillor Isaacs.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
So we do now have direction for the LGNZ conference, which is to be held in the middle of July. So thank you for your input into that. So we're now moving to page 105 of the agenda. Oh, okay. Do we have to? Okay. So 2.3, that the following direction is given by the Horowhenua District Council for voting on remits at the LGNZ 2021 Annual General Meeting. Tree protection is support. Remit number 2 is support. Remit number 3 is support. Remit number 4 is support. Remit number 5 is at this stage undecided, but we'll listen to feedback and conversation at the time. Remit number 6 is support, and remit number 7 is support. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Isaacs, Councillor Kay Simmons. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to page 105, the adoption of development contributions, and welcome to the table Jacinta and Ashley and Rob. So could I move 3.1 and 3.2 that the report be received? Councillor Kay Simmons, Deputy Mayor Mason, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, so before we get into 3.3 and 3.4. Jacinta and Ashley want to introduce the topic. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. What we wanted to do as part of finalising the policy was just talk you through some of the final changes that came through following on from deliberations and make sure everybody's clear before we adopt today. So as part of deliberations, we worked through, and the management submission, you approved a change in interest rates due to the increasing interest rates now that I'm on board and Doug's left. So that has now been reflected in the development contributions policy. In addition to that, we had the capital changes that you deliberated on and made as part of finalising your decisions on the long-term plan. So they're also reflected now in the development contributions policy. And as well, there were a few refinements to the policy wording to make things clearer and hopefully make it more workable as we go forward through to implementation. So I'll let Ashley talk through those refinements.
So the first refinement was around issuing a development contribution assessment when issuing a project information memorandum, a PIM, to assist building consent authorities. So Kāinga Ora are able to they are able to issue building consents, and this is a way that we can then charge the development contributions on that. Also some clearer wording around accessory buildings, sleep outs and utility buildings, just to ensure that it's very clear in the policy when a development contribution can be charged on that. Also some clearer wording around when we are able to withhold consents that have been granted until an invoice has been paid, and then allowing to postpone payments around land use consent for those consents that then need a building consent to build on. So for instance, a shopping complex or retirement village, and this is allowing them to postpone it until the building consent stage, so they'll still be charged a DC, but instead of being charged the full DC at land use, they'll be charged it at a building consent stage instead.
And lastly, in terms of finalising the due diligence around the modelling for the development contributions policy, we realised one of the calculations with the community infrastructure was not accounting for the full population growth and was restricted to a specific catchment. So originally in the papers that were received, that was sitting in at 2208, but that should be accurately reflected at 1247. So just highlighting that. What we will do is look to table that, put that table into the recommendations so that those final fees are reflected accurately. That's everything.
Any questions or clarification? Councillor Jenny.
Just two lines of inquiry. Now, I've already had conversations with you guys about some of the decisions we made during deliberations around the review, the annual review, and also the monthly reporting. My question at the time was why those are not inside the policy, and you've articulated the reason for that to me, and I just wondered if you wanted to share that with the table.
So we haven't included it in the policy, but it is on the monitoring report, which comes back to council and is reported on. So the review and the reporting will definitely happen. We just haven't included it in the policy, but it is on the report that comes to council, the monitoring report. Why?
Councillor Tupu.
Thank you, sorry. We thought it was a correct place to put it. We'll still get the review done. We're happy to include it in the policy, but we thought the monitoring report was a better place to put it. Can it not be both? Yeah, if you'd like it on both, we can put it on both.
So are you, I know, does that specifically need to be part of the policy? I mean, the intention is that we will be reviewing and monitoring what we've specifically asked already for that to be done, does it actually need to be part of the policy?
In many cases, all the policies I'm familiar with, you usually put on the front page of it how often it is reviewed. It's just a little date there. I don't see why we can't.
You're talking about the monitoring of the policy or the review of the policy?
So just for guidance, I think there's two components here. One is the review, and I think it's right to actually have a review clause in the development contributions policy, and that would be normal. As far as the monitoring, I don't see any harm in it being included in the documentation, but I think it's a note rather than a policy. It's a note that it will be monitored and it will be reported back to the council on a monthly basis, but incorporated into the body of the development contribution policy. It will also be, as Mrs. Hillier has highlighted, it will be noted in the monitoring report of the, I presume it's the LTP, as an item that will be monitored on a monthly basis.
Comfortable with that? Thank you. Any further? Councillor James.
Yeah, sorry, the second just line of inquiry was in relation to the report. It references about there being some changes because of some changes, assumption changes around Ohau and Watariri water. Is that correct? Could you just talk me through what the nature of the change in assumptions is? I just wanted to get my head around, is it a timing thing or what?
Sure. So originally, because those facilities, there's people living there that will likely connect when those facilities are available, that service is available in the future. Originally, during the draft long-term plan, it was assumed that they would all connect on day one. So that the existing population would connect on day one. So what we've done is we've staggered that so that it's phased over from the time that the plant and the facilities open to over the next few years rather than having it all at once.
As a follow-up to that, if you don't mind, is it a reasonable assumption that there'll be 100% uptake then? I mean, I'm not certain that you could have confidence that there would be that 100% take-up. Would there?
I think it would be fair to say certainty around the exact level of uptake's probably not there at this stage. So we've assumed that at this stage, but on a staggered basis over the remaining life of the plan, which gives a level of conservatism that was not there before. But absolutely, over the next few years, we would look at that, and as more work is done around what estimated uptake might be, those assumptions are likely to change, but it wouldn't be an unreasonable assumption at this stage. And in terms of from a risk perspective, with people and the lots coming on stream at this stage, no one is going to be paying that levy right away anyway because they haven't yet got that service provided. So we've got some time to work through that, but it's there, that price is there as an indication of what it might be at this stage.
Okay. Anything you want to add at this stage, Rob? No. Thank you. Okay, so we have 3.3 and 3.31, which was the additional piece of paper that you were given at the start of the meeting with the corrected table. So 3.3 reads that the Horowhenua District Council accepts track changes within the development contributions policy, which is attached. And 3.31, recommendation that Council adopt Table 1 below in place of Table 1 in Section 2.9-1 of the Draft Development Contributions Policy 2021 attached to the agenda. Could I have a move and a second to that? Moved by Deputy Mayor.
I just want to bring clarity, Your Worship, just
yes.
That the matter raised by Councillor Tukapua that those amendments will be included in there.
Voted yes. So I'm happy to move those two, and Councillor Allen is going to second those. Any debate or discussion? Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. I am going to support the motion. I'm just a little bit concerned, well not concerned is the wrong word, I'm mindful that we might not yet have the settings exactly right, particularly to encourage and incentivise particularly infill and around critically needed 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings, and I guess optimising that residential space and promoting and encouraging sort of granny flats with kitchens and bathrooms. But I guess I'm comforted in the knowledge that we've got that review process built in, and we'll see how things go. And I guess I'm picked up on Rob Bates' comments around essentially watching this policy and watching this space like a hawk to make sure that we do that we're constantly making sure that the forecasts and the assumptions are essentially on track. So, yeah.
So I will move from the chair 3.3 and 3.31. Do I have a second? Councillor Brannigan? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Allen has already done that, yes. And Councillor Allen did second it, yes, thank you. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. So now moving to 3.4, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the Development Contribution Policy 2021 effective 1 July 2021. Moving, Councillor Kay-Simmons, seconded Councillor Brannigan. Any discussion, debate? Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, just a couple more comments from me. But based on what just said about monitoring it and watching it like a hawk, I think that's the point, is that we need to be ready to be able to pull back on the capex and other spending if we notice that that's going off track. And I think even if we do obviously adopt this policy today, we need to continue to promote those front-end developer agreements, and that as a form of as an alternative to development contributions, as well as obviously exploring other funding options and sources, and very keen that we continue to explore how we could use SPVs and other partnership models, and I'm very keen to explore how we might collaborate with local businesses and other groups. I do think that some of the revenue assumptions for years 1 to 3 are probably ambitious, but I'll be happy to be proven wrong. So.
We look forward to that. Okay, so the motion's on the table. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. First of all, can I just acknowledge Rob and the relationship that has been built over the last few months. We really appreciate, as I said last time, the amount of work that has gone into this for us. And Ashley and Jacinda, I know this has been a huge role and job to do and get through over the line in the space of time. So I want to acknowledge the hours that has gone into it, and the thought and the process, and for us to be able to understand what we're actually signing up to. I think it's been really top notch, so thank you very much. Can I just publicly acknowledge the fact that we have reintroduced development contributions to Council, the fact that they have been missing for a number of years, and that we have, I believe, listened to our community, who have given us the clear message that they don't want to see growth being paid for by existing ratepayers, that it does need to be financed by those that will be enjoying the benefits of this wonderful district. So, yeah, it's good to see that we have listened and adopted such a policy now. And as Councillor Jennings said, I'm sure we're watching it like a hawk. Okay, so now moving to the adoption of the 2021-2041 long-term plan. And again, Jacinta, are you? Yep, Jacinta and Ashley and Deputy CE, Mrs. Brady, welcome to the table. Could I just move 3.1 and 3.2, that the adoption of a report be received of the long-term plan? Move Councillor Allen, second Councillor Isaacs. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Allen, Isaacs. Okay, 3.1. Over to you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to announce that this evening we are able to, about an hour ago or 2 hours ago, we were delivered the audit opinion from Audit New Zealand. Stephen Lucy, our audit director, will be present this evening at the Finance Audit and Risk meeting, but he won't be available for this meeting. But we have received the opinion and it's been provided to the mayor. So they finished their audit, and it's an unqualified audit opinion. So the wording in the audit opinion is up there for you. So the differences between what the audit opinion was at the draft and where we're at now in terms of the final is that they've removed their qualification around Taraika, and that's because we made the decision to bring that in and fund it through a process of borrowings, grants, and then development contributions. In terms of the emphasis of matters around the uncertainty of the Three Waters reform, the delivery of the capital program, and the infrastructure assets condition information, I would say are not dissimilar to other councils. I've had a number of conversations with colleagues that I work with across local government, and those emphasis of matter paragraphs are fairly common across councils in New Zealand. So just to highlight that from an audit opinion perspective. In terms of changes, so deliberations, we finished in terms of the discussion and the changes that you made. And then over the last couple of weeks, we've been working with Audit New Zealand to work through the final recommendations and getting to the final position that we're at today in terms of an unqualified audit opinion. There were a couple of things that we discussed and worked through with them that we arrived at a decision on that I wanted to share with you today. The first one is we've always planned to have a Three Waters revaluation. We have them every 2 years, and that's part of making sure that our assets are appropriately valued and that we understand the value of them when we lead into the replacement of them. So we received the final report from WSP. It arrived into my email box on Monday morning. Through discussions with the auditors, they're feeling that it was appropriate to include that in the long-term plan, even though it was at a very late date. And so we made the decision to quickly turn that around and get it to them so that they could audit those final numbers. What that means for us is, and that won't be anything different than what you're hearing in the media in terms of conversations coming out of the DIA about the cost of water increasing and the cost of replacing assets the cost of infrastructure is increasing. And so for us, that means there is an increase in our annual depreciation of about $500,000. and also an increase in the value of our three waters assets of approximately 67 million, which is significant. In terms of the detail on that revaluation, we will absolutely have briefing and work you through that in more detail. But for the audit have gone through it, they're happy with it, and they're happy that we're including it in these numbers. From a funding perspective, because the decision was made to keep rates where they were, we haven't adjusted any rates numbers. We've just made sure that the true cost of water is reflected in the numbers. In terms of operating surpluses and deficits, it doesn't change that. So we were already well on the way to making sure that we were in a sound financial position, and so it doesn't alter any years where we thought we may have a deficit. It continues to be only year 3 that's the case. So just wanted to highlight that from your perspective, and I'm happy to take any questions now or as we work through the adoption part of this conversation. As well, there were a few tweaks in terms of accounting policy words and additional explanations that they asked for around a few performance measures, so we've included some wording around there, nothing significant, and some editorial adjustments following the detailed review, so that might be some things adding up and rounding, tables not showing correctly, just normal editorial stuff that you would do as part of finalizing the report. But the last one, in terms of the differences between what we deliberated on and where we're at today, is NZTA's or Waka Kotahi's view in terms of reducing the funding across New Zealand for our three waters assets. So the $1 million. Oh, sorry, did I say three waters? Pardon me. In terms of the roading assets, so we were lucky in terms of the planning that our roading engineers did in terms of realistically where they thought the funding would set us, where it's relatively close to where we've ended up. Some other councils that were in a more difficult position, so we made the decision right away as soon as we got that advice to reduce the budgets to take account of that reduced funding. So were there any questions on any of that at this stage? So I guess that's it from our side. I've just put up there some of the key messages that we're planning on in terms of communications leading into adopting the plan and setting the rates this evening. The comms team have been working hard on campaigns around our social media and making sure that we're explaining the rates increase well, and people understand what it's made up of and why it needs to happen. So I'll probably leave it there at this stage.
Thank you. Is that it? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so moving now to 3.3 is the first recommendation in terms of the adoption of the long-term plan, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account submissions received during the formal long-term plan public consultation process, adopts the Horowhenua District Council Infrastructure Strategy 2021 to 2051. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Moved Councillor Brannigan, seconded Councillor Kay Simmons. Any discussion, debate? Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, look, I'm going to indicate that I'm going to be voting against the infrastructure strategy. To be honest, I don't think elected members have really understood the significance and importance of this document, and I don't feel that we have had the appropriate level of input into it. There's lots of things I can nitpick and highlight today around it, but I guess a core part of the strategy is about options and trade-offs, and I don't think as a governance body we have sufficiently worked through those. And in many cases, the options that are actually contained in the strategy are essentially black and white choices. It's either a gold-plated version or bare bones. And I think had we had our time again, I think I would have certainly pushed this governance body to put a lot more effort into this very critical document. And because of the range of deficiencies that I believe exists with it, and that the issues that I take with it, this is the reason I won't be supporting adoption of it.
Okay, so put the motion, all those in favour? Against? We have 3 against noted. Councillor Dupper, Councillor Jennings and Councillor Bishop. Councillor Bishop.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, is there going to be an opportunity just to ask some questions of the report? We've sort of gone straight into recommendations. General. Thank you. Look, I'm in favour of, and for many years have been, to display or to convey to the public what the rate is, and then show what the growth rate is as well, because it was always in the past, and I think our community has become comfortable with the total rate increase. And I just want to, for consistency, I just want to ask, please, like it says in 4.3, when council consult on the long-term plan, the document proposed rate increases after growth of 6.7, 7.3 and 5.6. And then we go down to 5.12, and it shows, yes, that consultation document of after growth of 6.7 and 7.3 and 5.6. Yet in the line below for adoption, as if there's not a precursor to say, actually this is excluding growth. Am I reading that right? Because we're talking about this 7.8 pre-growth. And I just wondered for consistency if we were able to explain that for me, 5.12 jumps off the page as a comparison of where we went out as an adoption and where we've landed, as a consultation, and where we've landed as an adoption. But I don't think it's apples and apples. It's one is inclusive of growth and the other is exclusive of growth, as far as if I'm reading it right.
Sorry, we went from 6.7 after growth during the draft to 7.8 after growth for the final because of the decisions that were made. If you would prefer us to put both before and after growth in any of the numbers, I mean, if there's a decision of this council as a preference, we can show things both ways if you would like to, in some of the communication. But the reason we just talk about it after growth is because there's a bigger base to share the rates across. What the household should experience is the after growth number is a key reason.
Councillor Jennings.
So, sorry, Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, is now you want to take general questions now rather than under each item, or what's your preference? Jacinta, can I just clarify under 5.9? Sorry, this was just in relation to it's actually 5.9 and 5.10, which is the Strategic Parks Fund and the Strategic Aquatic Fund. Just to confirm for clarity for everybody that although the resolution was around 1.25 million from year 6 until year 20 for both of those, in the actual long-term plan itself, they're shown as inflated adjusted amounts over those years. That's correct, isn't it? Just in relation to 5.11, I just wanted to understand the process here in terms of we put the dollar amounts in there for live-in town centre activation projects, and I just wanted to get some assurance around whether the mechanism to actually expend those funds, whether decisions will come back to council or whether those things will go through the projects committee, because there's obviously still some things to land around the blueprint. We've got things around the housing action plan, earthquake-prone buildings, O2L revocation, Wellington growth framework. And so in terms of sequencing and prioritisation, I think I have an appetite to have some input around the sequencing and exactly what those projects look like. So I just wanted to get some clarity around what does the go button look like for those in terms of using those funds.
So I'll attempt to answer that, and Mr. McCorkindale can correct me if I'm going down the wrong path. My view would be that it would come through both the project steering group in terms of an understanding of what it is that's being planned as far as expenditure aligned to this, and when there is a requirement to have a final approval of a particular item that's not identified within the budget, would have to come back to council as well. But that would be determined on a case-by-case basis. So if there's a budget line already that has had previous approval for a particular type of activity, and I just can't think of one off the top of my head, might be the fresco dining thing, possibly. That's fine, but if there are other things that need to be worked through in terms of what it is that we're going to deliver, that would come back to council for a final decision.
Councillor Tupper.
Well, that wasn't my understanding when we had that discussion and landed on removing those things and set, amounts for future or further discussion of this table, and then set the projects, whatever they were. I wasn't expecting that the ideas would come from the back and then land here and then would say yes or no.
So that's why I've suggested it goes through the project steering group in the first instance.
Oh, sorry.
Could we not have a briefing or something if there's a range of ideas coming through? And I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm completely comfortable with just the projects committee.
So I think in terms of where we're at with the works, say for the town centre, we recognise there would be the need, and it would be appropriate to have further briefings with council. I guess in terms of where direction or decisions are being required, obviously that can't be done through a briefing process. So at this stage, as the Chief Executive has indicated, back through the Projects Committee as we start to get to that more detailed level of it, and then I guess at that point decisions can be made whether it required something formal to Council or not.
Yes, but sometimes you may present back to us concepts, designs or plans, and you've spent X amount already on it without us having some sort of input, and that not always can be a waste of money or time, and I just would prefer if we had a bit of input before that step.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think probably just to pick up on some of Councillor Tupua's comments, certainly when I put this forward through deliberations, I had envisaged in my mind that there would at least be a workshopping or some sort of council session where there was some deliberate direction or steers given around which parts of the strategy we wanted to activate and in what order, and what we were actually trying to achieve. My preference would be that we certainly build in some sort of upfront decision-making process, or I think a workshop would probably be sufficient, and then in combination with the project steering committee, I think that can then operate in tandem from there. But
Councillor Tibbins.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, just give me one more moment. I should explain a little bit further. This is the live-in town centre. I'm a live-in ward councillor and I'm not in the projects committee, and I would like to have an input. That's all. That's where I'm coming from. This is my home, so.
Understood, and I'm sure those comments will be noted, and it will be a process that we will involve all councillors that need to be involved in that decision-making process, I'm sure. But, you know, we have put that extra layer of democracy in with the projects committee to make sure that there is the opportunity for individual discussions around different projects. And if you wish to attend those project meetings, you're more than so happy to do so. Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, I had one final question for the team. Just in relation to 5.13. So just talks there about key drivers behind year one increase of 7.8%. And obviously understand all of those bullets there. The one thing I'm just trying to reconcile with that comment though is the increase in the, I think it's called staff benefit expenses, which for year one is an extra just under 2.4 million against the current 2021 budget. And so my calculation was that was a big chunk of the rates increase, and I just wanted to clarify that if I could. Does that overlap with some of those bullets, or am I getting it wrong?
No, but in terms of largest ones overall, those would be the largest ones in terms of, but that the employee benefits absolutely is increasing. But an element of that as well is that while the employee benefits is increasing, there is a significant element of staff time for some of those new staff, for some of that additional resource that also works on capital projects. And so while they're reported in employee benefits, they also have a recovery to capital, which is significant, which you don't see when you just look at employee benefits.
Yeah, do you mind if I just follow up to that? Thank you. So yeah, because I also noted that for year one, I think it lumps them together with the payments to staff and suppliers, and that the increase on this year's budget is 5.3 million. So that covers essentially the increase in staff remuneration, as well as then the external funding of some of those things that are covered in those bullets. Is that correct?
Sorry, just repeat your question again, if you don't mind.
Sorry. In the financial statements for year one, it's got listed under payments to staff and suppliers. Essentially, it says that there's a $5.3 million increase as compared to the current operational budgets for this year. And so what I'm trying to establish is that within that, there was the 2.4 million in relation to staff costs, but the balance is covered by a number of the things that are covered in those bullets. Is my understanding correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so any further questions of the team? All right, so moving now to 3.4, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account submissions received during the formal long-term plan, public consultation process adopts the financial strategy. Do I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Bishop. Any further debate or discussion? Put the motion, all those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings against. thank you, noted. Moving to 3.5, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account the submissions received during the formal long-term plan public consultation process, adopts the revenue and financing policy. Moved Councillor Brannigan, seconded Councillor Isaacs. Any further discussion, debate? Councillor Jennings.
Just wanted to comment here. I guess this is a bit of a Clayton's choice because we didn't really consult on any changes to this particular document. And if we wanted to make any changes in terms of the public-private splits, we would have need to have done that through the long-term plan process. But I'm comforted, obviously, the fact that we are going to be undertaking that review exercise in the coming financial year. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you. So the motion's on the table. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 3.6, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account the submissions received during the formal long-term plan public consultation process, adopts the community outcomes. Is that how that finishes? Just community outcomes? It's not a policy or strategy? No. Thank you. Moved Councillor Tukapua, seconded Deputy Mayor Mason. Any discussion, debate? Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, bit of a broken record today. I'm going to be supporting this motion. One thing, though, I do think we need to be realistic about is that these community outcomes, they're not being informed by a sort of coherent vision or mission developed by this table, because we haven't done that.
There's no objection to Councillor Jennings making his view, but he's speaking as though he's speaking for the table. In my view, he's not. So can we just make sure that Councillor Jennings is speaking for his own view, please? Because there's been a few comments about how other councillors don't understand things, and I'd just like that clarified, please. Keep your comments to what you view, not your.
Well, point of order, Mr. Mayor. That's actually not a valid point of order, and the standing orders make it clear that differences of opinion are not a valid standing order. So I would ask you to rule that wasn't a valid standing order, and let's move on.
The point of order that Mr. Councillor Brannigan is noted, but I agree with you that you are able to make those opinions in terms of how you think this table operates, so you may continue. Thank you.
Yeah, and look, sorry, and I'm not going to go on about it, but I don't think we do have a clear vision or mission as a governance table. And, you know, I have raised that previously, and you know, we talk about, well, we're for growth, but again, we still haven't settled on, are we chasing that growth, or are we just getting ourselves in a position to be able to receive it? Well, and I think it's going to make a real difference to what we focus on, what we prioritise, and how we engage with our community about that whole growth story. And so, look, as I say, I'm going to support these community outcomes, but as a governance body, I think we've got a lot of work to do in terms of that vision and mission space.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion's on the table. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 3.7, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account submissions received during the formal long-term plan public consultation process, adopts the rates remission policy and remissions of rates on Maori freehold land policy. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Allen moving, Councillor Case Simmons is seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Tukapua.
Yeah, I always kind of cringe when this one comes up, just being honest, because, you know, on the face of it, it just looks like Māori's getting a free ride. That ain't true. I just want to be clear that in many cases, and you heard from farmers during the submission hearings, that many of these lands are landlocked. They can't even access them. So the use is limited, and you actually have to apply for this remission. It's not automatic anyway. So there is very little free rides around here for Māori. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion's on the table. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 3.8, that the Council, Horowhenua District Council resolves that it is prudent to adopt a budget that is not balanced in year 3. This is on the basis that it will be recovered over the life of the long-term plan. Councillor Brannigan?
Can't see it, just a typo on there.
Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Mitchell. Any discussion? Put the motion, all those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings, Councillor Tupapua and Councillor Bishop, thank you. Against? 3.9, that the Horowhenua District Council, having taken into account the submissions received during the formal public consultation process, adopts the long-term plan 2021-2041, including the policies and statements contained therein in accordance with section 83 and 93 of the Local Government Act. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brannigan? Any further discussion? Well, Councillor Bishop.
I do have a concern, Mr. Mayor. Just look, for the sake of the public, this has been a long journey, this long-term plan, and it sort of took a fork in the road early this year, where we were heading down a track of what looked like a pretty challenging year, with a discussion point around a 30% almost rate increase, and some pretty hefty CapEx program, although we were hoping to have the Taraika infrastructure costs parked somewhere neatly off our balance sheet, and sadly that didn't eventuate, and we had to then almost reset. And while there was a lot of work going on, and I do thank the team at the table here who spent countless hours trying to make this whole formula work, trying to keep within our benchmarks and balance the rating demand on the public. But I guess, as we all expressed early on in the year, where our comfort level lay as far as debt and rates and CapEx, for me the ongoing issue has been the level of CapEx program, which hasn't been spoken about this afternoon so much. And while I sort of signalled early on in the year a comfort level around the 30 million, to go a step change to 50 for so long, I'm just not comfortable with that, and I have expressed that in the past. That won't come as a surprise to you all, but I just am not comfortable, given the grilling we get often from audit, or from, we had it this year from Council Mark, about not being able to, or the level of our CapEx program and things like that. So I do flag that as a concern for me. The table have their own view, I know, and I'm happy to go along with that. That's just the process, but just I wanted to express that tonight, that I'm nervous about that level of CapEx.
Oh.
Well, it comes as a surprise. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this long-term plan, and I've talked previously about how I found the process to arrive here quite frustrating and at times, I guess, alarming, but there are some positives which I'd like to highlight a bit later. But 3 months ago I voted against adopting this $2 billion long-term plan because I didn't think it was ready to go out to consultation because of those process flaws and concerns about the content. And that was mostly because I just didn't support the plan sitting behind the consultation document at the time, and I didn't think it was responsible or prudent. And I was concerned about proposals to increase council's debt ceiling and debt levels, as well as the scale of proposed rate increases. And while we've made some progress and there's some changes and some positives, I do remain concerned and sceptical about a number of aspects. And since deliberations, I have reflected on my position. But for me, this is just a plan that I just can't celebrate, and I can't sell it to my community. And I do feel somewhat vindicated by my earlier views around the plan, because it looks quite different to when it was first released as a proposed document for consultation. Collectively we have, I think through deliberations we went through an exercise of cutting around about $90 million worth of CapEx projects, and I was very pleased to lead a chunk of that. But we've obviously put a whole lot of things back in, and so for me, it's that issue that we haven't pulled back even further. As I said, I wanted to highlight some positives, and I think it's great that we are doing something about water storage for Levin, especially after the issues with drinking water this week. And it's also that it is pleasing that there is that growth focus to deliver critically needed housing. But as I said just before, I think our plan around growth is somewhat confused, and we haven't yet found that coherence or synergy about what we're actually trying to achieve. I'm pretty excited about the Levin Town Centre activation budget, but note that we need to do some more work around, again, what we're going to prioritise and the sequencing of that. I'm also very, very pleased that we have some operational resources and focus to do the rating review, the affordability assessment, and look at the rollout of some zero-based budgeting, as well as the review of the finance and revenue and finance policy. And that's going to help us focus on budget setting going forward. But for this year one of this long-term plan, it comes too late. And there's a significant rate increase that our community is facing, and I've seen the reaction to that on social media after our deliberations, and for me it reinforced what I think we already know, that our community is under increasing pressure, and many people simply cannot afford what we are proposing. And I reflect on your comment at the time, which was actually a little bit persuasive to me, Mr. Mayor, around that ultimately the rates increase would only add $4.25 on average to the average rate bill. But as I got into it further, that extra $4 or $5 is already on top of the $50 that's coming out of a pensioner's budget each week. That pensioner on a fixed income, and our rating impact on households is significant, and we need to do more to constrain those rate increases. And for me, we need to focus more on our core function, and we need to be open and honest with our community and invite hard conversations about what role they want us to play and where they want our priorities to be, what we should do less of or not at all. How do we get better value for money? And for me, it's all about a conversation around trade-offs, and we need to have those sort of adult and upfront conversations with our community. Through this long-term process, we haven't had hard conversations about operational budgets and operational savings, nor have we set sort of a firm funding envelope in which then prioritisation of decisions could be made. And again, I think Councillor Bishop mentioned comfort level around rate levels, debt limits, and I reflect back on our session back in January of this year when we're in that room just over there, and in a closed session, you, Mr. Mayor, went round the table and said, what is your comfort level on rates increase, the net debt ratio, and the size of the CapEx program? And to be frank, the levels are in this plan to be adopted are nowhere near what I had indicated in terms of my comfort levels. So and I think it's important that we reflect that this plan really is about debt. This is a massive growing debt mountain on our watch, and I think the paper refers to a peak of 232 million in 13 years, and on our watch, in the 3 years over which this council has control over the budgets, $50 million in extra borrowing, and that's about $2,700 or thereabouts extra debt per household, on top of the $5,500 that already exists. And by my maths, we'll be spending around $9,000 a day in interest payments alone on that debt, and that's equivalent to 4 households worth of average rate bills a day. So, unlike Councillor Bishop, I remain concerned about the proposal for council to almost double its current annual work program to over $55 million. There remains a range of big dollar projects around which we just haven't had the rigour around, and I'm not convinced that all of them fit with our overall objectives and that absent vision. Look, so it's with some regret that I indicate that I won't be voting to support the adoption of the plan today.
Thank you for those comments. Any further? Deputy Mayor Mason.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do have some sympathy or thoughts for Councillor Bishop's and Councillor Jennings' concerns over our debt. We are in unprecedented times in terms of growth that's facing us, but also in terms of the reforms that are before us as local government, and we've had to be absolutely focused on thinking about what we need in terms of infrastructure for those changes that are likely to come our way under Three Waters. And we note that within our letter from the auditor that those matters of emphasis are around that uncertainty with Three Waters. So we've listened, we've taken time, we've listened to the community around nice to haves, and we've made some really hard and difficult decisions. The Foxton Pool, we had a huge number of submitters in favour of that, but we took a fiscal approach on that we couldn't afford to put that additional burden of debt on our community, and made some flexible approaches around parks and reserves that I think really reflect where we want to be as a district. So, look, I think the next 3 to 5 years will see a huge change in the face of how we operate as local government. So it's been hard work. This is my 3rd term on council. This has been the biggest workload, significant. I'd like to think we've listened. I think we've had a very balanced, it's been an amazing group of submitters this year. It's always a difficult decision, but I feel like we've landed, as we know, with our road transport budget in a very realistic position as we face what will be some significant reforms and see some significant changes in the way infrastructure and core services around water and potentially other services will be delivered to our public. So we've set in place a work plan that I think reflects the future need of our district. So I will be supporting this huge piece of work, and I hope that our community are aware that it's done with a mixture of some caution, but also thinking about the future of what growth looks like and what our district's going to be like into the future.
Nothing further? Can I just also make a few comments? I acknowledge that this has been quite a long and intense journey. It has been different and more challenging than any previous long-term plan that I've had indications from previous longer-standing members of this table than I am. But in saying that, we made a pretty bold choice some months ago that we wanted to be chasing a 95th percentile growth target. That has implications. It does mean that we have to be a bit more positive and a bit more constructive in terms of the platform that we give that enables that growth to be managed. And why that is why one of the reasons why we've reintroduced development contributions today is to hopefully be able to manage and sustain that growth. I'm obviously aware that any rates increases are the focus for any annual plan or long-term plan. I do take comfort in the fact that having seen the table for the country, we are below the average for districts in this country. So I don't believe that we are overextending, if you like, the reality of what the challenges that our residents have to face. And it was, for me, always going to be a challenge in reflecting on what we did last year in terms of taking the rates decrease down. At some stage, we were going to have to find what we lost. And I think today's decision in terms of supporting this long-term plan will give us a platform to move into the future confidently and hopefully constructively and positively. So thank you. Councillor Tupper.
Yeah, if I may just make a few comments. And I'm glad you mentioned the annual plan, because as I reflect on that and the stance we took in the community got a rates decrease, we all know why we went through that exercise, and that was a tough one too, because we were divided. But we saw no real impact. We didn't get like a truckload of complaints about levels of service and that things weren't done, because we actually tried to cut things or find savings where there wouldn't be that immediate impact to the public and to users. So going into this long-term plan though, this is my third long-term plan, and we do 20 years, and some other councils still only do 10-year plans. I mean, that's part of why it's quite a mammoth task. You're looking across that many years, but also the growth phase, get that. But when I'm a little bit disappointed in myself, probably because, while you were developing that consultation document and putting out the preferred options, I wasn't here for that part. So I had to take leave. And anyway, there was a good outcome there. But I tried my best, and we all do. We consider all submissions and the views of the public and try to strike that balance and make quite a bit of effort during deliberations. But why I mention this is my third LTP, because we've never done the end of it quite like we did this time, where we parked a lot of things and then did a whole tranche of adjustments. We've never done that before in my time. And at that point, I'll be honest, it was a long process. So getting on the tired sides and parts, especially with a lack of sleep. But I am going to say I am torn. I'm not completely comfortable, but I've had the chance to debate each one and each of the motions through the process. And so as a whole, while I will disclose, like others have, the point around the CapEx and the 55 million is just the OTT, we know there's shortfalls around workforce capacity and how they never actually have the manpower sometimes to actually get all that work done, and we know that we've got that evidence. But I take on Deputy Mason's point about the reforms that are coming, and so some of those 3 water projections could quite just be hopping off our hooks onto someone else's. So yeah, that gives me some sort of ease. But anyway, I will support it, but with caution, and the incoming council, whoever you are, might be some of us, take the next few years, including that DC's review, very carefully, so we don't want to stifle, what we want to achieve here, but we don't, I still, this is rambling now, but it just hurts me to know that people are on $25,000 a year income in this community. That's hard going. Anyway, feel for them, and we can't keep trending increase when their money ain't increasing.
Thank you. Anyone further? Okay, so the motion's on the table. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings, Councillor Bishop. Against? Thank you. So now moving to 3.10, that the Chief Executive be given delegated authority to make editorial changes that arise as part of the publication process for the Long-Term Plan 2021-2041. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We have an additional recommendation that the Mayor, 3.11, that the Mayor be given delegated authority to approve the final long-term plan, which takes into account final amendments requested from Audit New Zealand as part of finalising the long-term plan. Could I have a mover for that? Councillor Bishop, seconded Councillor Isaacs. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So we got there. Well done. Thank you for your input into that discussion. It needed to be had, and all comments and opinions are all valid. Thank you. So we now move to the adoption of rates resolution for the year ending 30th of June 2022. Could I move 2.1, 2.2 that the report be received? Councillor Brannigan, seconded Councillor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So, any questions or clarification given by the officers? None? Okay, any questions for officers? All right, so moving to 2.3, and we have 1A through to 1. It's just a long one. No, we have to do it individually, I think, Paul. Yeah, that's correct, isn't it? Never done it. Okay, so we 2.3 1A through to.
It's just 2.3.
Right.
No, it's just 2.3.
Oh, okay. So we're moving 2.3. The setting of rates for the 2021-22 financial year, that the Horowhenua District Council sets the following rates under the Local Government Rating Act 2002 on rating units in the district for the financial year commencing 1 July 2021 and ending on 30 June 2022. We have A, general rates, B, land transport rating rate, C, stormwater rate, D, community central library rate, community centre library rate, representation and community leadership, solid waste disposal rates, aquatic centres, swimming pool rate, wastewater disposal rates, water supply rates, and we need to do.
No, just keep going. It's all one resolution.
Including differentials.
Yes. All one resolution.
Okay, so including number 2, differential categories, general rate, farming category, general rate district-wide, solid waste disposal rate, wastewater rate, availability differential, water supply rate, connected differential and availability differential, and then number 3, due dates for payment of rates, number 4, penalties, Number 5, payments of rates. So Councillor Allen is prepared to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell. Any further debate or discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings is abstaining. Thank you. It's carried. Just wanted to thank you all for that, and Cinda, welcome to your first Horowhenua District Council long-term plan and setting of rates. I hope it's been a good journey so far for you, and Ashley, for your work through this long-term plan process. I don't think we wouldn't have been able to get to today if it hadn't been for your amount of work that you've done in behind the scenes, and I sincerely want to acknowledge that, and I hope it's not been too wearying for you. And also, Nikki, your team deserves probably a couple of days off, but I know there's probably too much work to do, but thank you again for, and please pass our thanks to the rest of the team for the contribution that they've made. Thanks. Someone sitting over in the left-hand, in the public gallery tonight, is usually sitting on the right-hand side of a thing. Doug, this is probably, after 30 years in local government, to be able to sit in the public gallery and see that. And I know we've said some words today, but just wanted to acknowledge the fact that you are here, and publicly thank you for the contribution that you've made, not only to this organisation, but to the wider local government sector. Thank you. And I hope it's not the last time we see you. Although I don't want to see you in that seat making submissions next year, all right? So we now move to our last topic on this agenda, which is the Lincoln Place Reserve Livenable, which is on page 123. Could I move receipt of the report? Councillor Isaac Singer and Councillor Kay Simmons, all those in favour? Against? Carried. So we do have 3.3, and Arthur, are you coming to the table to? Yep, thank you. So in terms of this, we do have a number of options in front of the table. So we will at some stage get a councillor to move one of those options at some stage, but first of all, are there any questions of Arthur? Sure, Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. The dollar amounts that are reflected under the cost section, so 6.1 of the paper, are you envisaging these are costs that will need to be put into a annual plan, or that needs to be a positive council resolution to include that budget, or are these numbers just essentially an indication of the possible cost that could be required, and could this be managed from existing budgets around parks and property?
The prices are indicative. We're not asking. I think we just need to clarify. We're not actually talking about getting the Livenable up and running at this point. We're just purely and simply talking about the preference that council has moving forward. As has been indicated in the report, this site is one of the sites potentially for disposal. So we need a little bit of guidance on what actually council wants us to do with this site, whether it is to retain it as a reserve or whether it is to introduce some option 3 or 4. So in answer to your question, those are just indicative only. It will depend entirely on how much of this is funded by the community, and I do know there is an interest from the community in it.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, Arthur, I'm sort of struggling with why this wasn't in the long-term plan. We've just passed spending for the next 20 years. and now we have another sort of potentially capital project come before us, and it's got costs like maybe 250 to 350,000 if we chose option 2 as a playground, and then on top of that there would also be toilets, which would be another 200 odd thousand, I guess. So potentially you could be looking at something like $500,000. You've talked that there is a possibility of outside funding. I need to be assured that that outside funding is definitely going to be forthcoming, and what sort of amounts we're looking that council may have to come up with. Have you got any idea about that?
I'll just go back to, I'll reiterate what I just said to Councillor Jones, if you don't mind. This is not about introducing and building Livable. This report is merely about determining council's interest in the site moving forward as to what council wants to do with the site. So, as indicated in the LTP, there is the requirement for a number of property sales. What this site is one of those that would normally be being put forward potentially for a property sale. Clearly, we've got another interest, which is obviously Livable. So I'm not talking about in this report about funding for Livable. I'm just talking about what is council's direction moving forward on this particular site. Is it going to suggest that this site does become Livable, or is it of the opinion that one of the other options needs to be observed? So I'm not asking for it. There's no capital requirement or capital request in this report. It's purely about direction moving forwards and what that site's going to look like in the future.
I'm just going to ask Deputy Mayor Mason. She has been intimately involved in some of this discussions.
Well, I have, along with many members of council, worked alongside this group, and their support would be for option 3, that we would give in principle today a decision for mixed use for the Lincoln Reserve. And yes, it is disappointing that it missed the long-term plan process, but I think probably we've potentially broadly encapsulated that in our long-term plan report around our strategic parks fund, so it could be very well captured within that as we have conversations around that in the future. And of course it sat there as part of our property disposal plan, and what we're looking for, or what this group are looking for, is an indication from council that we would keep that land rather than dispose of it, and allow for them to be some consideration of a community-led park development along with some housing on that site. And consultation has been occurring with this site, albeit in a very limited or a more limited capacity, but the report does outline that. It outlines the history of the work that's done, and I make no secret of the fact that I've had a long career in the support of disabled sector, and that I know from families' perspective the challenges where there are parks that are not accessible. And we have a lot of those in Levin, or they don't provide safety. The consultation really has been hosted by Tangata Whenua, and it's been a truly community-led process in terms of thinking about what an accessible park in our district might look like. It's included conversations with neighbours in that area, with Pacifica, with disabled people and their whānau, and included members of community organisations. They have aspirations for a multi-use, community-driven path that also tells the story of Horowhenua and its rich history through its construction. They're aware of our challenges around housing and our issues with growth, and see that a combination of housing and park which provide lots of benefits. The drivers of the concept around this park, the members of IHC and other groups, have access to and have been working with philanthropic groups and bequest funders, and are very confident in being able to get funding that would not become a burden to the ratepayer in terms of development of the park. So they're essentially not asking for money. It's a bit like the group that submitted to us in the long-term plan out at Foxton around the
the bird watching pavilion out there. They're not asking for money, they're asking for a commitment that we don't dispose of the land and that they can start their process of looking for funding, and that we as a council can start some consideration for looking at what housing development might look like on that piece of land. So look, I want to say disabled people and their families will tell you that the development of this park would be more than just a playground. It will be about sort of equity and benefit for all. And we've heard that story. If we build a world that's accessible to all, it's good for all. And yes, we do have referenced in there the Live in a Bench playground, which is a fantastic resource for our community. But if you're a person who lives with a disability, to access those pieces of play equipment that are designed specifically for the disabled, you actually have to go and get a key if the place that holds the key is open in order for you to use them. So while we have paid some attention to accessibility, it's not really accessible. So this park, if we give agreement in principle today, in the long term will be one where you don't have to ask permission to belong. It'll be a place of belonging for everybody. So what I'd ask you today is consider that option 3 is the option that we support in principle, that will allow the group that is supported in partnership by Maupuku to start to plan for how that park could be delivered to our community, and whether that requires, and it's likely that it will, more discussion and consultation through our next annual plan. That's the process we have to go through, but I really would urge that we don't continue to see that land disposed of, and that we consider option 3 as potential use for it. Thank you.
So, Councillor Casons.
Yeah, only if no one else wanted to add. In regards to option 3, just reading through that report, and I totally get what you're saying, Arthur, around just needing direction, but more than once Lincoln Place has been referred to as that high deprivation area, and while that is true, the green space in the surrounding streets should really also be acknowledged by all of us as an important part of our township's history. It's the only piece of 1950s in its entirety that we have here, and I think it's important that, it would be this is a perfect and exciting opportunity to recreate with the housing and the recreational space by adding that to this area, and I think it's just a really positive way for our community to move forward.
Thank you. So, just to move things along, can I ask Deputy Mayor Mason if she would agree with this recommendation, which will be 3.3, that Horowhenua District Council has a preference that Lincoln Place Reserve becomes a mixed option of reserve land, home to the livable, accessible playground and medium density residential housing.
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Kay Simmons? Okay, so the recommendation's on the table. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Bishop.
Is it worth noting what sort of split, like with how much of that is park and how much is reserved for housing?
I mean, all we're doing at this stage is indicating a preference. Okay, so it's only giving direction. It's not actually formalising any sort of, project sort of specifications at this stage. Any further questions? Motion's put. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So, just one small item to go before we close the meeting. Sorry, 3.4. Now the council has selected option 3, it authorises officers to pursue revocation of its current reserve status under the Reserves Act and consider the site for a plan change to facilitate affordable medium density housing. Can I have a mover and a second for that? Councillor Allen and Councillor Kay Simmons. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so before I close the meeting, just wanted to acknowledge the lady on my left, who after many, many years is retiring. Well, you know, she won't let me use that word, but won't any longer probably be sitting after today at the table. So I've asked Deputy Mayor Mason to say a few words on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wandon, and it is actually really personally a privilege to say a few words, Karen. So on behalf of Council, Finance Committee, independent members, I just really want to thank you for the contribution you've made to Horowhenua District Council, for the support you've provided to a multitude and variety of elected members who have been in your care and in this place over the 16 years that you've worked here. You started here with us in 2005, before my time. And among a lot of the tasks you've undertaken, you took a shared role in supporting council and its committees from 2006. A logical choice, can I say. And you were, in 2014, you got appointed to your current role of governance and executive support, where you've been fully responsible for creating agendas, thank you, for taking meeting minutes, thank you, and for all of the associated follow-on tasks from meetings, including herding us as cats. You're a familiar face, a steadying hand, and a stickler for process. So over the 16 years, you have supported us at Council on the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, and the Hearings Committees, thank you, Foxton Community Board, District Licensing Committee, Lake Domain Board, which was probably some of your most exciting time, and with various iwi project groups. Your knowledge and expertise in the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, as we've seen tonight, and the Local Government Act and standing orders and everything else in between, has really been appreciated by many, or all elected members, I think I would say there. And we know you as that go-to person in terms of governance, and that you will bend over backwards to assist us where you can. So it's not quite farewell, because we know that you're coming back and doing training, and looking after the people who will be attempting to fill your shoes. And it is a bit of an auspicious night that we do this. We've adopted a long-term plan, we've made some significant decisions, and you are important to us. You have been amazing. When I think of you, I think of kindness, efficiency, honesty and integrity. And, sorry? Well, there is growling, yes, a little bit of that. But in the nicest possible way, though. And you're probably the only person that rivals the CE in terms of being the baby whisperer of the organisation. If the baby comes into the room, it's a fight between David and Karen. But at a very personal level, your kindness to me when I had a life-changing event, you were the person who was a steadying hand when I walked back in the building. So, you know, we all have our very personal memories, and thanks to you for what you've done. So, Karen, I know you're not buying a motorhome like our esteemed Doug Law over there, and you're planning to stay as much put as you can in the district, but you will be, your guidance has been amazing, and we know that you're going to carry that on through your training, but thank you formally for your last official meeting, which is an auspicious one.
Councillor Allen.
I'm sorry, I hope you'll indulge me, Mr Mayor. I I won't try.
I'll always indulge you
Oh,
as well.
No, look, I just wanted, I guess, in terms of the community board, wanted to acknowledge Karen's extraordinary role that she played up until recent years on the board. She followed Dennis Cole, who, and in both cases, their loyalty to the board and their willingness to go the extra mile was something acknowledged by every member of the board. And so I think it's important to put that on record also. I just wanted to personally thank Karen for my time as chair of Hearings Committee, because she kept us very much in line and I mean that in a positive way, in terms of dotting I's and crossing T's. And we've seen it tonight as the very final motion. She pulled you back and she got it right. So that sort of thing can't be dismissed lightly. And I also, very cheekily, because I couldn't get here earlier today, I need to say what a treasure Doug has been. We are losing two extraordinary people from the organisation, and Doug didn't get the chance to say it, but I did try to put a few words in writing about how he helped me to understand stuff that I'm still struggling with around financial literacy. I'd appreciate if that was not minuted, but thank you very much, Doug and Karen.
Thank you both for that, and yes, I apologise already in future that meetings may not be run as efficiently as they have been in the past, but I'm sure she'll be watching exactly and send me notes. So Karen, on behalf of us all, thank you very much. And could I, this is the end of our formal meeting, so Piri, could you please close the meeting for us? Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind, I'll close with a waita, and I'm just going to chuck Doug and Karen's name in there. Okay. Tēnei te mihi aroha, kia korua Doug me Karen o Horowhenua, piri mai piri atu ki tēnei o ngā. Whakamamahara mo tātai rohe, Horowhenua e rere ngā wairua, ki tēnei mo tātai ngā kainiera, he matikana, kia aumane ai, kia kawea mo ngā tau kei te heke mai, rauhi te rau whetu ki te mana, rauhi ngā tikanga kaua, e ware, he whānau kotahi tātou.
Kia ora.
Sure. Special way to finish the meeting. Thank you. Declare the meeting closed. Yeah, look, apologies to the members of the public. We have taken this meeting a bit longer than we had intended or had thought might be happen. So we'll commence the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee meeting at 5:15.
Right, good afternoon everyone. Let's open this Finance, Audit and Risk Committee meeting. My apologies for my croaky voice, I should be on that side of the table, I understand. Sorry? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, what was that, Councillor Bishop? Right, do we have any apology? I understand we've got one apology. Ketu, can I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Todd. Second, thank you, thank you, Councillor Victoria. All those in favour, please say aye. As gets carried. Public participation, there is none. Late items, there are none. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any for the decisions of the meeting? I'm not aware of any. Confirmation of the minutes held 28th of April. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, as gets carried. There are no announcements. Now, we've got our Audit New Zealand Director with us, Mr. Stephen Lucy, and I wonder whether we can move 7.6 up in the agenda so he can be released to go and probably sign some more LTP audit opinions for tomorrow, no doubt. You sound surprised you haven't got any due tomorrow, Stephen? If you'd like to just come to the, the other table would be appreciated. So we're dealing with item 7.6 on page 53 to page 117. I will take the report as being read in detail and fully understood by everybody, bit of tongue in cheek. I assume the CFO, you've got no comments to make on this report? Just to put you on the hot spot.
I guess one comment that I would make is the report's probably longer than I hope it will be at this time next year. We are on a continual process of improvement, and hopefully a number of these items will move to be removed from the list as we move 1 year forward and finalising this next annual report.
Stephen, have you got any highlights on the report? Hopefully everyone, as I said, has read it, so any highlights you would like to bring before we open it up for questions from the committee members?
No, the only thing under there obviously is that we did do the qualification, but members of the committee are aware of the reasons for that, so that's probably the only thing different, and as I say, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Probably if we can, probably I'm going to do it page by page, otherwise we'll be here for 55 minutes, but we could sort of try and keep it in a relatively logical order so we're not flipping backwards and forwards. So are there any questions in probably the first 5 or 6 pages? Might be the way to do it.
Just a question in relation to page 61. Heading is quality and timeliness of information provided for audit. There's some comment there re timeliness in preparation of council, both at the pre-final and final audit visit. And I just wanted to clarify what council has explained, what council has offered to you in terms of correcting that for next time.
My conversations with Jacinta and the team are that, as evidenced in the interim audit, that we provide the requirements that we're after an appropriate time ahead so that the team can be prepared and that we'll get the information we required. And certainly the interim audit, from memory, went well, so I'm anticipating that we'll maintain a good process that way.
I guess I can't help but making one comment, which is for the long-term plan, the final information, everything was provided on time. On day one, everything that was requested was available and was complete and fully on time.
Any other? And I,
Sorry,
Not
I had to
disagreeing.
say
I'm not disagreeing with Jacinta. Sorry.
can I also just make a comment on that? This is not the first letter I've seen in the last few months on this very issue, and I think there was an issue called COVID last year that actually did disrupt people's information flows, particularly when there was a revaluation. I was aware of one council that had their revaluer was in Auckland, and when the revaluation was taking place, Auckland went into level 3, so they couldn't go back to the office to retrieve their data. That was a sort of surprise Saturday announcement by the Prime Minister. So I think hopefully those won't be happening again, and everyone's probably more comfortable about working remotely. Any other questions on page 61? I'd like, Stephen, there seems to be some, going back to page 60, there seems to be some disagreement between staff and yourselves, and I'm probably siding with staff, that I probably agree with staff that by putting the unrealised loss or gain into the interest expense may actually create more misleading information than being helpful to the reader. Bearing in mind when you have got long dated swaps, you're recognising the unrealised gain or loss on that swap all in 1 year that may actually have costs or benefits over the next 1 to 7 years. Whether you'd want to comment on that?
Well, we've made the comment because we are of our view. So I guess it's, from our point of view, it's about being clear to the community that this isn't just a potential paper thing. It is actually, if the interest rate's held at the rate at that balance date, in this case 30th of June 2020, that would have been the cold hard cash cost to the council. So I appreciate that it's long term, but notwithstanding that, it is a genuine finance cost. It's a decision that council's made in terms of managing its long-term risk, in terms of wanting certainty over the volatility. But it is a number that we think needs to be clearer to the community through the way it is reported in the annual report, that this is actually a finance cost.
Thank you. Okay. We agree to disagree. Moving on. Any other comments, questions as we go through the comments? I'm up to about page 67. Oh, sorry, Mr. Jackson.
Chairman, I'm helping you because I'm on page 107.
Oh, thank you.
And this is for my education, if you may. I don't quite understand what borrower notes are.
So when we borrow from the local government funding agency, I believe it's around 1.6%, effectively need to hold on deposit. And so you effectively borrow $100,000, 1.6% of that is held, and you get the cash amount less. So it's sort of a deposit or a risk factor that they do from a borrowing's perspective for LGFA.
So in our books, it's an asset?
In our books, it's an asset, yep. So we'll have the full amount of the borrowing on the books, but we'll have an amount equal to 1.6% of that, which sits as an asset.
Thank you very much.
And can I just defend LGFA, although I'm not actually party to LGFA. The reason LGFA, Local Government Funding Agency, need to do that is so as more councils borrow, the greater the debt. Normally, in terms of banking, because technically they are a bank, they would need to actually increase their shareholders' capital. So rather than asking all the councils then to contribute more capital, including the government, they say is if the borrowers could actually then leave money in for a liquidity perspective, which then helps give them a positive position with Standard & Poor's and Fitch's, which lowers their, increases their credit rating, which reduces the cost to local government. But we also, as the CFO said, we also get interest on that, so it's not lost. It's not a lost money, but it's just an accounting issue. But that's the reason we have to do it. And the other trick is also if LGFA was then to suffer a credit squeeze when we came to repay our debts, that amount would be then converted into share capital. Complicated, I know, but that's the world we live in, and I'm pleased Doug's here because that wouldn't have occurred pre-1996, Doug, when the annual report was only four or 5 pages long. Any other questions on the report? Councillor Jennings, you can go backwards if you like.
Thank you. We'll start at page 72, please. Through you, Mr. Chair, this might not be a question, it's probably more of a question for the Chief Executive. It just relates to the heading there, credit card usage. So this is credit card expenditure of the Mayor, Chief Executive and Senior Management. So 2 questions. I'm just wondering whether we, at the moment, proactively or publicly disclose that on our website like some central government agencies do, and if not, why not?
We've never disclosed it on our website. It has been sought by way of Horowhenua. People have actually requested that information, but it hasn't been something that we've done to date, no.
One thing I'd just note around that credit card is that it's more for purchases that we need to make online, but as an organisation, that credit card sits there so that we can make purchases like Facebook advertising, or for purchases that you can't normally do through an invoicing. It's not so much a use card, it's more of an organisational purchasing card.
Then just in relation to the same topic, page 73, there's a comment there. We also found one instance where a transaction was not supported by a tax invoice. We were therefore unable to conclude whether the expenditure was reasonable or not. Has the organisation post that comment made any inquiries around that particular transaction?
To be honest, I followed up on that one this morning, and I need to check because I don't know the answer, and I hadn't followed up with Audit to see what it was.
Turning to page 74, conflict of interest management. There's reference to an updating of the council's conflict of interest policy, I think it is, due for completion in September 2021. I just wondered how we were tracking against that.
Actually, can I just cut to the chase? All right, there are actually a number of actions here all the way through that are due for completion August, September, or dates. I think what we'd actually like to do is actually ask probably the Chief Executive, does he believe, or the Chief Financial Officer believe that those dates are currently achievable with the resources, rather than specific items. Otherwise, we'll be asking the question 4 or 5 times. I think it's probably more it's a relevant question, but let's group them all together.
Sure. I mean, I guess the reason I'd raise that one is I personally think that's a high priority one, but I'm happy with your approach.
Thank you.
On page 75, there's reference to contract management. And so the question I had around this is sort of multi-pronged, which is I wanted to understand our current practice around post-work completion checks, i.e. is that a standard part of our process that we go out and check the quality of the work, that everything's been rectified to a particular standard, all that kind of stuff? Because I got from the impression I got from the report was that might not be an ingrained practice.
I'll take that. Through the Chairman, Councillor Jennings is referring to 2 aspects. One is lesson learnt reviews, which taking place on most of our major projects as they come to either milestones or completions. But you also mentioned workmanship and quality, and our works crews and engineers do regular checks on that quality of workmanship as it relates to practical completion and snag lists to complete the project in its entirety.
Just in relation to that same line of questioning, I have a question that's further on in my line of questions around page 106, which is about contract retentions. And I think, again, the comment in the report is that the procurement manual or contract management processes haven't got that as an ingrained part of or ingrained practice at this stage. So again, I just was looking for some clarity around the relationship between our contract retention approach and that, and obviously the part that you just discussed.
Sorry, Councillor Jennings, I'm not quite sure what the question was.
Yeah, so the question is, again, is contract retention a standard part of our process, building those into the contracts that we enter into?
Retentions are one option to retain some security over the work. There are other options available to us through our suite of procurement models.
Just a quick note that the retentions are, some councils have them sitting in a spreadsheet, but we've got them within our financial system, all of the retentions that we have. So at any time, they're all held within our financial systems, any that are sitting within there.
Sorry, under page 77, under 4.5, so it's just under the heading Audit Response and Management Comment. We were advised by management that individual changes are being checked, however these are not evidenced. I just was wondering what the issue is there.
Is this for the payroll master file? Is that what you're meaning? Yeah. So as part of the review, manager and my team goes through with the payroll officer and they review all of the changes. What they need, what we will work on so we can evidence it with audit is that there's something that shows that it's been reviewed and that he signed it. Rather than, it does happen, it's just a matter of showing that there's a signature beside it so that we can prove it.
And I think to be fair, there's a number like that.
Yeah, this is some that have been sort of focused in on. Item 4.8, which is on page 78. And I was just wondering if you could talk to us about what actually are these process improvements that are planned in relation to the response.
So this is in respect of...
This is in relation to councillor conflicts over... identifying transactions greater than $25,000. And so it basically talks about there being no proactive process around that. But essentially the management response is that we'll do some work on it. And I just wanted to understand what it was that we're proposing.
So I don't know specifically, but my assumption would be that all of the interests that are identified as part of the council, what the councillors would identify as part of conflicts or interests. We would then run reports out of our financial system, which would show transactions with that entity.
But if I can clarify, what is being suggested by audit is that before a payment is made to a elected member or where there's a conflict, that before that payment is made of any amount that needs to be checked to make sure it's not under the 25,000, my understanding is that the current process picks it up after it has been made. Is that?
I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah, okay. That's the way I read it. And I just want to clarify with the auditor, I understood that the Members' Interest Act requires the elected member before the expenditure is made to seek approval from OAG, but often the council does that on behalf. Am I wrong or am I right on that one? I think the responsibility is for the elected member, not for the council.
My knowledge is I'm not going to reach for you on that because I'm not too sure. So, but certainly councils, I agree, councils generally do act as an intermediary. The other point is it's not just when the payment's going to be made, because actually the transaction's already happened at that stage. It's actually trying to make sure that any risk of it's identified before the transaction's entered into in the first place. Once it's happened, the horse is gone.
Councillor Pereira?
Should 4.8 be elected members rather than councillors, so that the community board members are captured, or they're treated differently?
I can answer this one. Community board members, because they don't actually have any decision making, aren't captured. Okay. However, unfortunately, the independent members on audit and risk committees are captured. Okay. Just a trap for young players. All right, any other questions? Councillor Jennings?
Sorry, moving to page 95. There is reference to the organisation saying, due to the additional effort required compared to the benefit, management has accepted the risk on the following basis. And my question really was, through you, Mr. Chair, are we comfortable that that is a management call to make as opposed to a governance one?
I guess it's a few hundred dollars. In terms of logging in and out, if it's not a material amount of money, and so it's not, the risk is quite low. Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Jennings?
Yes. Thank you. Just moving then to page 96. There is reference to, at the top of 96, consistency between the rating FIS and the rates resolution. And so there's a comment there that is essentially implying that there's been a legislative breach previously around the rate setting. And my question was slightly provocative, but is why that hasn't been reported through to the FAR committee before, because I would have thought that as a legal risk, that's something that this committee should have been made aware of.
My understanding, it was a very minor technicality in terms of there being a breach as such, but in terms of, and it was corrected, in terms of this long-term plan, we also made sure that the rates resolutions, which you signed off tonight, and the funding impact statement, which was included in the long-term plan, was externally reviewed by legal, so that we could be doubly sure that we had it right.
Moving then to page 101, there's reference here to rates that are no longer legally collectible, and that it basically discusses that they'll be written off. And so, from my perspective, that's obviously an option of last resort. And so I just wanted to get some assurance that we do have, I guess, a debt management escalation process that is working well before that point. I mean, and so I was trying to get a sense of what are we actually talking about here in terms of no longer legally collectible, because surely that means that they've been uncollected for a long, long period of time. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, those are going to be the anomaly. It might be land that's not accessible where there's multiple owners. It might be a number of different things where you can't access, where a process hasn't been through to remit land, or there's difficulties around it. But in terms of management of rates, the team are very focused on the collection of rates. At any point when the penalties are applied, letters go out straight away. We have an arrangement with Debt Management Central, who is part of the local authority shared service, where if we have issues around collection, that it goes to a debt management agency. And so I think the team is very focused in terms of the level of outstanding rates. You've seen through the quarterly FIRE reports that continues to drop. And in terms of this quarter, this rates and where they're sitting for this report, they've reduced again. So I think I would say that this council is in a good position in terms of collectability.
Sorry, then moving to page 109, I think the heading is Senior Management Remuneration Reviews. And I just wondered whether there had been consideration given in terms of the response to audit around this, development of a remuneration and employment policy, which is something that the Local Government Act refers to, and I know a number of other councils had, and I just wasn't sure why we don't.
Mr. Chief Executive, you going to answer this with help of Lisa? I just Councillor Jennings, I think these items have all been cleared to the satisfaction of audit and just are there for completeness.
So in response to the question, we do have a remuneration policy in place. It is due for review, and that will be done, as I understand it, in the next 12 months.
So sorry, the remaining questions there about obviously closed matters, so you prefer not to cover those?
No, just highlighting that
Oh, okay.
stopping you from us asking questions. Highlighting that these are raised, just to clarify.
Okay, sorry, I'll wrap it up. Move to page 110, which is funding agreements with third parties. So, it looks like this was quite specific to the Te Awaho newsroom, but I think there's a broader recommendation here about the use of formalised agreements where there is funding transactions. And so, I guess the question I had around here was, we just recently had a workshop around some of our iwi resourcing agreements and partnership agreements, and I just wanted to make sure that we were prioritising some work around those agreements in order to obviously reflect and be consistent with what audit's telling us needs to happen in terms of our agreements.
We are.
Yeah, look, I think that's enough.
Thank you, Councillor Sam. I think there's a lot of information here, and I'm going to, and I think I've already given Nikki a heads up on this one. So we've already got an internal audit action report in terms of progress. I'm bearing in mind that our next scheduled meeting is now August. That we then bring a summary of the outstanding items on this from this management letter in terms of a reasonable program for completing it, and some of it might be a number of years away, particularly when we don't actually have a revaluation until 2022 or 23. I am particularly concerned that there are a number of policies that need to be adopted around August, September time, and I wonder whether, bearing in mind that tomorrow is 1st of July, whether those dates are really achievable, and that's the question. I share your concern, Sam, about the priority of those pieces of work, and maybe some priority in terms of risk as well as resources required to complete would also be useful. You happy with that, Mr. Chief Executive and Nikki?
So just, I've been tasked by the elected members to form a work program for the next period for council. So these items will be identified, but there are a large number of others as well. So that work program, or an outline of a work program, program will come back to council, and I would hope that the elected members could help me prioritise that work program as we're going forward, because we won't be able to do it all at once. So that will be something that will come back to the probably in the August window after the council has returned from their July reprieve.
Are there any other? Oh, sorry.
I'm looking at us here, to my apologies, Brian. I was looking for a staff member with us.
They wouldn't have me. Chairman, I know it's career limiting to disagree with you, but I wondered if this report, through nobody's fault, it's pretty ancient for me. We could get wrapped up on a lot of stuff in this. Wouldn't it be better, knowing that the audit this year will be much quicker, that we just wait and see what comes out of this year's audit rather than go to a lot of drama about what is a very old report?
Can I defend myself in terms of maybe clarify what I mean? Obviously, when staff go through that list, they will know of the issues that they believe have been resolved, and that actually, I think it's actually quite. And obviously, if it well, I don't think it will actually disappear off Audit New Zealand's report. You'll actually then, if it has been cleared, it will actually still be on the Audit New Zealand report next time as being an item that's been cleared. And so what I'm thinking, Mr. Jackson, would happen is that if staff think that something has been cleared, there would be a section, just like there is on the work program, that this is actually completed, and I wouldn't anticipate a huge amount of work being required to do that. It's more for completeness, because what I'm, and why I'm a bit of a skeptic, because this is what I used to do, is sometimes if I didn't want to do something, it would actually somehow drop off the work program, and I would hope that no one will actually pick it up. Right? So I'm being brutally honest, and that can actually come back to bite council. Stephen.
So just one other comment is that Jacinta's following on Doug's fine tradition and applying the whip to us with great abandon from time to time. So we did, through the interim audit, look at making sure that we had got, if there were further ones to be cleared, that we did do that as part of this year's interim audit. So this is relatively current state of play.
Thank you. Any further comments? So somehow we need to go back to our page 53, and we've got a recommendation there. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Victoria, seconded by Member Jackson. Any further discussion? Now, I don't think we need, just before we put that, I don't think we need to actually move that we actually bring that back as part of the work program, Mr. Chief Executive. I think that's going to happen. Right. All those in favour, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you, Stephen, for your contribution, and we look forward to seeing you here to present to Council a unmodified financial statements on the annual report. I think there might be some still ongoing legacy issues with statement of service performance relating to some of our performance measures, but thank you. Right, so if we go back to the agenda, it's back to the Customer Services Strategy Activity Update. I'll take the report as read. Are there any questions from our wonderful two ladies? I don't see any questions for you, unless you've got some important updates for us.
Good evening, everyone. I've just got a couple of comments that I'd like to make to my report. So in terms of the consenting activity, it has continued to rise at a much higher rate than we expected. So just to give you an idea of where we're currently sitting, as of 30th of June, we have consented over 800 building consents for what I believe is the first time, and we have lodged, I'm hoping by the end of the day, it will be over 900 building consents as well. So activity certainly increasing. Additionally, resource consent activity, we have granted approximately 15% more subdivision and land use consents than we did last year, and the number of applications lodged is around 8.5% higher than the end of the year last year. So things are continuing to increase at a fairly high rate. Just the other thing I wanted to note is that in the last month or so, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of other councils in the consenting space around how they're currently coping with the same pressures that we're experiencing and how they are currently performing in reference to statutory timeframes. So one thing that we have noticed this year, we certainly haven't reached our 100% statutory compliance goal, and that's always unfortunate, but given the level of activity that we're seeing, having 99% of building consents issued within timeframes is actually a fairly good outcome, particularly when the discussions we've had with other councils, which has formed a bit of a benchmarking there. Additionally, we're currently doing inspections around 4 to 5 days after being requested. Some councils are up around the 2 to 3 week mark. So we're certainly still continuing to deliver a pretty good service comparatively, and even though it's not necessarily exactly where we'd like it to be, when we look at the kind of bigger picture, we're actually doing really well. So that's all I want to add.
Thank you. Any comments? No comments, no questions. Okay, thank you, ladies. Can I have a move?
Chairman, sorry, just in case anyone else wants to say it, or in case they don't, I'm going to say I think it's a fantastic result. To get 98% of a task, I've never been able to do that.
Yeah, I can just say, I mean, this fact that you're getting inspections in, was it 3 or 4 days? I'm aware of one council, I won't name it, you've got to book it a month ahead. Book it a month ahead. And if you don't meet it, then you've got to wait another month. So imagine what that's doing to the poor builders. So well done. Thank you. Right, so can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 7.1, please? Thank you, Councillor Todd. Second, thank you, Councillor Victoria. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. This is carried. Thank you, ladies. Our next report is our infrastructure activity update. Take the report as read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's been a few months since I've done a bit of multimedia. So I've got beside me Tony Parsons, who's been project managing the Foxton Beach wharf remediation and the Foxton wastewater treatment plant. So we thought we'd take you for a 2-minute trip down memory lane with some before and after shots with both of these projects right in their last couple of days towards completion. So just bear with us, we'll get it rolling. And we'll take questions afterwards if that's okay.
Hello everyone. You have to bear with me. My presentation decided to delete itself, so I've just recreated it in the last 15 minutes. So we've been working on the remediation for the Foxton Beach Wharf. Good stuff. So since the temporary wall was put in place in 2014, it's since degraded to a point that something needs to be done. It's a highly valuable space, as everyone's aware. Tolman and Taylor did an options assessment for different methods of fixing it. We selected the most value for money one. Went through a procurement process earlier in the year with local contractor Caldo being selected. Following on from the regulatory compliance with the one plan, the regulations were that we need to start from May with a 8-week quite intensive program. This is just stepping through the stages of construction. One of the key things was sourcing materials so there weren't any delays because we wanted to finish before winter. This is the installation of the Revenant wall here. 800 tonnes of rock was brought down from Macquarie. The Manawatu Boating Club also took the opportunity to commission some precast panels to fix the wharf itself. We took the opportunity to do that work in line with our work. You can't really see how I had an awesome video. This was with the recent flooding, which tested out our wharf before it was finished. Luckily there was no major damage and the Revenant wall held up. And Rodney is just from Calder has been really putting in the work, and we managed to pour the concrete for the footpath today on the last day of the financial year. Still a little bit of work to go in the next week tying it up, but yeah, largely a success considering, I guess, the quick turnaround time with the procurement and fitting within that tight window. The next one was the Foxton Wastewater Treatment Plant. I sort of became involved with this project in late last year. We treated this separable portion of the larger project sort of in isolation, just for tracking purposes and to make sure that we were getting value for money. Construction started in February with the guys mobilising to site. Largely bulk earthworks was the first activity. This was through the Horowhenua Alliance. They put together a really good team for the job, used predominantly local contractors, subcontractors for the bulk earthworks. The lining contractor was one we've used on the other ponds. Again, there's been a really big push in the last 2 months to complete the welding. It's very difficult when it's raining. You can see there's a small army of Viking crew out there. And you won't believe it, but we completed the welding today as well. So the commissioning of the pond will happen on Friday. And yeah, there's significant cost savings found through the use of the different materials, looking at different ways we can descale things that didn't necessarily need to be how they'd been designed because of the tight budgets on the project. So really good outcome for that one as well. Thanks. Any questions?
Nothing like a very up-to-date briefing, thank you. Are there any questions?
A question, but more of a comment really, just it's quite an achievement, the Foxton project, wharf project being pretty much on time given everything that's been thrown in the last month, because it's been pretty hairy out there at times with the weather, the river conditions, so it's a pretty good achievement, so well done everybody, because I didn't think it was going to happen.
Thank you. The river loop regeneration, it's not often that you see that the forecast cost is actually going to be less than the budgeted cost. And is that cool? Does that reflect back on us? We don't have to pay more and central government pay less. So does it actually mean that we're going to actually save money ourselves on this project?
So the commitment between council and the then Provincial Growth Fund, which is now renamed itself under MB, was that the total investment in that stage one of that river loop was $5.2 million, of which 3.86 came from the Provincial Growth Fund, and council would then use its activities in that area, be that roads, be that amenity improvements, or other things that would help and be specifically integral with the development of that park, would be our contribution. So the net investment will still be that original 5.2, give or take. But we're allowed to cash flow that dependent on when those projects that are integral with the park come available. So for the time being, we've always planned to upgrade Harbour Street all the way back to Seaview. But Mother Nature has intervened, so we've just put that roading improvement work on ice until the summer, in which case that will carry on and continue. So the net outturn with my graph will balance.
Yeah, so that sort of almost answers my question, which is around the trolley bus wires, and it's not really a matter of urgency anymore. We still want to get it sorted, but it's not urgent because we're delaying the works. Is that what I'm hearing?
The trolley bus wise is currently with through the legal system of the courts, and we aren't able to comment at this stage.
Chairman, page 21, 3.6.3, Project 2. Clearly there was a lot of extra cost involved in this. Were we covered with our contingency on that?
Through the Chairman, yes. The answer to that is yes. We, with projects like this, we do anticipate bumps in the night, so there was sufficient contingency to cover this. Bearing in mind that there was a significant proportion of this investment through the 3 Was Stimulus Fund, which is paid for stage 1, which has allowed us some headroom in our overall budget.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the two learned gentlemen? Thank you. So if we go back to page 15, can I have a mover for the recommendation 7.2? Thank you, Councillor Ross. Seconded, Councillor Todd by Whisker. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is our infrastructure operations activity update, page 23 and 24. Mr. Chief Executive, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the absence of Kevin Peel, I just wanted to provide the councillors with an update on the Gladstone Road realignment. So you'll be aware, based on the information that we've been circulating over the last 3 days, we've in a media release that we've put out this afternoon, is that we've made the decision to actually close that portion of road that on Gladstone Road that is susceptible to the slips, and we had a significant slip earlier this week. And as a result of that, we have made a decision to provide or to construct an access across the 2 river crossings that we were planning to use for the long-term permanent alignment of the new road, and also use the land that we've secured a couple of years ago to have a passable road constructed, and we're doing that under emergency. So I've invoked what's called Section 330 of the RMA, the Resource Management Act, to undertake emergency works. It means that we don't have to go and apply for resource consents now, but we will have to look at retrospective resource consents down the track. We're hoping, working with the Horizons Regional Council, that we may not have to do that retrospective resource consent because we're actually applying for consents for a new permanent crossing of the 2 river points with the bridges. So I suppose what we were intending to do, we've had to accelerate as a result of the significant slip that we've had in the last 3 or 4 days.
Any questions? Councillor Jennings?
Plenty. Can I just first acknowledge Rebecca Kilby-Halliday, who's sitting in the gallery behind me. She is one of the residents up Gladstone Road at the moment who is severely disrupted by the events that have happened on that road, obviously affecting her daily livelihood and business activities, along with many of the other residents in that area. I guess I want to inquire into a number of things, and first I'd like to start with the press release today, in terms of that being released. I think it was at about 1:20 for to be released to media at 1:30. And so my question is twofold, which is why were councillors not looped into that decision earlier? And I also would like to understand the decision to essentially abandon the road. I'd like some understanding around why you think that is a council decision as opposed to a governance decision.
So I was actually guided by the incident management team that was established to actually deal with not only the water issue that we had, but also the access issue that we had into that particular area. I have got the delegated authority to actually invoke that section and to actually provide a solution that was deemed acceptable or deemed reasonable by the incident management team to provide short-term access into that valley, and I did that under the section 33A and B of the RMA.
Follow up, please, Chair. In relation to that decision to essentially abandon the road, and while I understand there is a process in place to restore that access, and there's obviously some limited access arrangements, what's informed that decision to essentially abandon a whole section of road and essentially I guess impact a whole bunch of people for an extended period of time? Is it informed by engineering reports? I mean, what's the evidence base?
Yes to all. So we have to make a judgment call on a number of issues. One is the geology, one is the stability of the site itself, and we also have to look at the safety of workers and putting them in danger underneath an active slip face. We then have to look at the time it might be out of action whilst we could possibly be working on an alternative. There's a number of factors that go into our decision making, and the operations team through David made the call that the construction under emergency of 2 fords in the river and the earthworks to create an active passable road was on balance better option than treating what was a very unstable slip face and all the risks that came with it.
So further questions I had around, I guess, some of this contingency planning. Actually, sorry, I'll change this. Is that from my reading of just a quick reading of section 330, why was this not an option beforehand? Why did we not explore using this option as beforehand when it didn't necessarily require the slip to actually come down?
I guess the use of that act is very well defined. You have to actually have an emergency, and so I think the paper was written. Where you read Kevin's paper, we are acting on it very quickly. In any way, we've issued contracts and awarded contracts to suppliers to get underway with enabling works. We've hired people to give us the designs. We've started work on the consent. So we weren't asleep at the wheel. We didn't have the emergency that we could act on. We've only got that in the last couple of days, and that's enabled us now to act more quickly than we were anticipating. But just rest assured, when this paper was written, we were moving very, very fast, nonetheless.
Yeah, I think I probably disagree with some of the aspects, but obviously that's for another day. It's unfortunate that Mr. Peel's not here to answer some questions, because he was quite happy to tell me how to do my job, and I was quite keen to explore some aspects of perhaps how things have been managed in the past. So what I would be looking for is a report on why some of these contingency plans were not developed and formalised earlier, and I've got some particular questions around the Trig Road access road, and so I understand, for example, here I've got an email that was sent to 2 residents on Monday 28th of June where council advised, we will also have some maintenance work on the Trig Road later in the week. We may need to restrict the only access to the Trig for half a day.
Can I interrupt there? What's the relevance of your questioning in respect of the item on the agenda? I know the Chief Executive has brought an update. I don't think this is the appropriate forum to actually be raising these sort of questions. I understand your concerns. Also, it has been an emergency situation. It's not uncommon, if you live on the west coast, to actually take 4 or 5 hours to get to your destination. when they've actually had a number of slips on the west coast. So I think the issue is, let's get the road fixed as fast as possible, in the most safest way possible for our ratepayers and our workers. We have an obligation to do that. And I think then we actually look back and say, what are the learnings? I think by actually trying to circumvent something now is actually going to slow the process down.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess the one group of people you missed out from your speech was residents.
I did say residents.
And you're exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what I'm looking for, is a lessons learned, because there actually are immediate access issues for those residents. And so I believe it is within the scope of this item on the agenda, because it's a significant risk. That's what this whole purpose of this committee is. There is a risk around access and issues for people in that area right now, and so it's absolutely appropriate to understand the issues around contingency planning.
I disagree, because I think the issue has been addressed by the Chief Executive, and I think if it's an operational issue at this stage, unless the members of the committee believe it's an urgent item that we now need to formally suspend standing orders or go and deal with this under urgency, I don't see that as a decision of this committee. I understand there's residents that don't have access, but I think we need to actually stay on track as the purpose of this committee. Mr. Chief Executive, or do you have any further comments to make on that?
Well, I'm happy to close this out by simply asking the question, when will the lessons learned be done? When's that debrief going to occur?
I will make a comment. We're dealing with a very, very significant event that actually occurred at the weekend. Our priority is to actually address the current situation. There will be the place and time to actually review what has happened, whether there's actually areas that we could look at in terms of improving, or identify areas that we could have done better. But it's not the time today, in my view. It hasn't been the time over the last 2 days to actually deal with that. The immediate priority for us was the water supply in 3 of our communities, the opening up of 3 roads that were closed during that time, and we've still got a significant one on Mangahau Road that we still have to deal with, and obviously the one around Gladstone Road. It's part of our process that we will review these incidents. It's just a normal thing that we do, but it's not the time, in my view, today to actually do that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Can I have a mover then for the recommendation on page 23? Thank you, Member Jackson. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Member David. Councillor David, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Our next item is our Alliance activity update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, David.
I'll just introduce David York, who's the Alliance Director. Most of you hopefully have had a chance to meet David, and he will lead the conversation.
Okay, so the report that you have there in front of you, I'd like to move that that's taken as read. Are there any questions? I'm happy to answer.
I've got no takers of questions. You must have done a sterling job in terms of your reporting.
I mean, I may have missed a meeting where the Alliance have come before. Otherwise, this is the first for me, where they're at the table reporting in this way. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind just talking me through your pictures or your little signals. What do you call those?
Okay, that's section 3.2, the KPI update. So the first KPI we've got there is to have more than 80% of our jobs completed within a certain time frame. In this situation here, we're showing 53%. The reason for that is that there's one big job in there, which is the electrical checks at all pump stations and treatment plants that hasn't been completed, and until that's complete we can't tick it off. The other thing is, in terms of those program works, there was only, I think, the one job in there, so it's very hard to get a high percentage when you've only got a small base you're starting from. Three Waters activity levels, once again, percentage of jobs completed within a contracted time frame. We're aiming for 100%, we achieved 92%. Next one, Three Waters rework. We're aiming for less than 3% rework. And you'll see on that graph there, we've got 0.3 of 1%. So very few instances of rework. And in terms of water quality and water safety, we've had 100% compliance during the period. It's also worth noting, in the last month we've had 4 compliments from the ratepayers and 1 complaint. The complaint related to a water supply shutdown that was notified and didn't take effect, but it took effect the following day as provided for in the notice, but ratepayer took exception to that. But yeah, that's basically a summary of how those KPIs work. It's just a graphical way of displaying it rather than a whole lot of words.
Sorry, Brian, I missed you again. That's twice, isn't it, today? Or was it 3 times?
I'm getting a complex. Can I just ask David, what is bagged ballast on page 26? Part way down, sorry, second up from the bottom.
That's on the liner that's been installed at the Foxton Wastewater Treatment Plant. So they're actually bags of ballast to prevent the liner from floating when the pond is empty, when it's got no water in it and the groundwater table rises, the liner will come up. So they ballast the liner down so that it's permanently weighted down in position.
Thank you.
Otherwise it gets airlocked underneath and then you'll burst it and all sorts of things.
Thank you.
Any other questions of David? Thank you, David, for your brief and succinct report. We look forward to are you going to be a regular presenter? Thank you.
Yes.
We might see if we can get some more creative questions for you next time. So can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 25, 7.4, please? Thank you, Todd. Seconded, Councillor Victoria. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Our next item on the agenda is our 11th-month report, financials. Thank you to my learned friend on my right. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'll take the report as read, but just highlighting really the key element is in terms of how we're tracking with the capital program, being around 28 million of the 30 million budget, which is great at that stage. We'll see how we finish up now that it's the last day of the year today, but it sounds like Tony will help to make sure that that happens. So happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? No questions? Self-explanatory. I think it's actually we've actually a good result for the year to date. We'll just see what happens for the remaining reporting period this month.
So I guess one thing I'd note is in terms of the costs of the events over the weekend and what those bring in terms of operational costs and capital. We haven't quantified yet, but we will be doing over the next week.
Any questions? Therefore, I can't go to page 28, 29. We've got a recommendation there that we receive the 11-month report I'll move. Do I have a seconder? No, thank you, Christine. Off the corner of my eye, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Next item is our internal audit monitoring report on page 45. Take it as read. Are there any highlights, comments from staff? There are none. So just clarifying here, we will receive this quarterly. So we'll see this every 3 months, and if I think we then get into a sync with receiving the audit letter, once that's been agreed in terms of the process, it actually hopefully spreads the workload and the agenda thickness over a period of time. Any comments, questions? There are none. There's a recommendation on page 45. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Ross. Seconded, Councillor David. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. I think that then completes we've dealt with our audit letter. We now need to move into, no, sorry, I lied, thank you. You're still doing your job, right? Our actions. There's two? Yeah, we've done that one. We did that one. Did we do that one when our auditor was here or not? Did I skip that? At the beginning of the meeting. Okay, that's once. It's all right. So we've got I think we're even now, our FAR actions on page 117. Don't think it needs any comments. So Councillor David has moved that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Victoria. Any discussions, questions? All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Now, can we have a resolution to move into public excluded? Thank you, Member Brian. Do I have a second? Thank you, Purihira. All those in favour, please say aye. This gets carried. Thank you. Now, just before we... Oh no, we're already too late. Doug's got to leave now. Just before, I should have done it before we did. Thank you, Doug, for your support over the last... Was it 5? How long have I known you here? Five years? Yeah, thank you for that. And all the best for the future. Thank you. That's hopefully your last meeting where you've been observing too of the Finance Audit and Risk Committee. Probably. You might come back to haunt me. Yeah. If the public could leave, thank you. We shouldn't be too much. We should only be hopefully 5 or 10 minutes.